Good evening. My name is Jonathan Wolfson. I'm the chair of the Board of Trustees. And I want to talk to you for a couple moments this evening. I'm always awed when I'm in this theater. It is a great reminder of how fortunate our children are to be able to go to school in this special canyon and in the beautiful buildings that make up our campus. When Stephanie and I first visited Viewpoint over 17 years ago, many of these facilities were not here. We loved Viewpoint because of the excellence in education it represented. That excellence was centered not in structures and buildings, but in the amazing administration, faculty, and staff. Over the years, the Board of Trustees, with the help of many of you present here tonight, and other families, were able to build facilities that matched that excellence in education that already existed here on campus. In the meantime, Stephanie and I have been fortunate to have had 4 children attend Viewpoint. We have enjoyed each and every moment here, as have they. Sarah was the class of 2009. Joshua was the class of 2011. Eli is now a sophomore in college, and Eddie is in 11th grade. It's hard to believe that our days as Viewpoint parents are coming to a close. Viewpoint has always done an excellent job in educating our children. For the older ones, when they were launched from Viewpoint, they both had a certain centered sense of self. They were able and not afraid to tackle new things. They have a certain sense of confidence that comes not from only what they learned at Viewpoint, but from how they learned it, what I would call the process of education. In my mind, when discussing 21st century education, that is what we're discussing, the process of education and how that process needs to be adjusted to adapt to the new technologies and realities of our world and the future world of our children. In an era where information of any and all sorts can be summed up from your smartphone, what are the important skills to emphasize in education? I do not profess to be an educator, but I have thought a lot about this issue, as I know your Board of Trustees has thought a lot about this issue. I know that 21st century education can be considered a buzz phrase, and that there's a lot to unpack when thinking about how to define that term. But to me, the most important aspects are critical thinking, collaboration, and communication. Let me use Eddie, my 11th grader, as an example. In AP Biology, he spends a lot of time discussing challenging theories in both labs and discussions instead of just memorizing pages of information. Mr. Didden strives to challenge his students to be excellent critical thinkers. When Eddie has a group project, he's learning how to collaborate successfully with others. Sometimes that collaboration might use technology, might take the form of a Skype discussion amongst his classmates, usually too late at night. And in AP English, Eddie is learning how to improve his communication skills. Much of the class time in Ms. Rivera's class is spent in discussion, where each student needs to successfully express their thoughts and ideas regarding the subjects they're learning about. These 3 aspects of education, critical thinking, collaboration, communication, along with creativity, make up the backbone of skills that a successful curriculum will instill in our children. I would posit that Viewpoint has always done that, but that the new ideas that are infusing education at our school will help it further evolve into an institution that will prepare our children for their future. Who is leading us towards that future? Our head of school, Mckee. Mark is in his 3rd year here at Viewpoint. If you've seen Mark on campus interacting with your children, then you know what an integral part he's become of our school in such a short period of time. Mark is everywhere. The children are always excited to see him, and he always has time to talk to them. And as the board knows, Mark is an excellent chief executive and a partner in the strategic path that Viewpoint is heading down. What sets Mark apart is his ability to speak authentically, truthfully, and lovingly about our school's next chapter. Please help me in welcoming Mark to the podium.
Think about a teacher. While we say that education's transformational, that great schools change students' lives, it's really great teachers who change lives. Everyone transformed by the power of education remembers a teacher who changed their life. For me, it began with Miss Alvernaz, the first grade teacher who created a classroom with experiences that showed me that I was a writer. A thread that continued through to Mr. Dino in my senior year of high school, whom I still recall saying he's a merchant of words, encouraging me and inspiring me to be one too. Even though I thought I was headed for a career as a research scientist. Inspiring teachers change lives. In my case, teachers impacted me so much that I never left school. From my ancient Greek teacher in college, who stopped in his tracks one day just to say, "Look at the beauty of this line of poetry." He was overcome. From that professor to a professor of Milton in graduate school, who read a poem at my wedding, a tribute to the way that she taught me to think differently about so many things, including the power of magical thinking. While I've brought these images of teachers who impacted me to mind, perhaps you've been thinking about the teachers who changed the path of your life. It's really true. While we say that schools change kids' lives, it's really teachers who change kids' lives. Education research tells us that the single most important school-based factor in student achievement is an effective teacher. We know this from our own experience and common sense as well. So it's by invoking memories of the great teachers who changed our lives that I want to invite you to this year's event, the State of Viewpoint School. Tonight we'll be introducing the latest work on our strategic framework for Viewpoint's future, including two important announcements about programs that will have an impact on the education of every single student. Our strategy is fully focused on our students. So while I invite you to have the teachers in mind, you can be assured that the teachers have the students in mind. After a brief introduction to our strategic framework, I'll be joined on the stage by a panel including our head of primary school, Kathy Edelman, and our director of college counseling, Rhodey Davis, so that we can represent the full spectrum of education from kindergarten through 12th grade and beyond. Before I begin, I want to talk about the future, as our strategy is concerned with the world that our students will inherit and lead. The future, they say, is already here, and we already know the truth. Some great percent, 70 to 80% in one count, of the jobs that exist today will be gone in 20 years. You might have read Tom Friedman's book, Thank You for Being Late, in which he describes this age of acceleration that we're living in. How many of you have read Tom Friedman's book? I strongly encourage you to have a look at it, because he describes these three ages of acceleration, which are all happening at the same time. All of them exponential curves. And if you know the exponential curve, there's a point at which it goes up to infinity. Those three accelerations are the change of globalization of our economy, the change of climate and Mother Nature, and the change of Moore's law, or microprocessor speed, so the changing pace of technology. And those three changes can be graphed, and all three of them map onto this incredible age of acceleration. So if you feel like you can't keep up today, whether it's with your email count or your kid, Tom Friedman explains why. I'll tell you, it has us focused on what does that mean for school, because I know we all feel like we can't keep up with the pace of change. It's become a bit of a cliche to talk about being a school of the future, and yet we're making true what a school for the future is. Take a look at our lifers. This is the name for Viewpoint students who've been here 13 years, and this group of students gathered on the Love of Learning wall recently to plan their future spring, a lifer lunch that they'll have to celebrate their 13 years at Viewpoint. These are the students who've gone through from kindergarten through 12th grade together. When we think about when these lifers entered kindergarten in 2004 or 5, not that long ago for those of us who are adults in the room, And even they can remember a little wistfully what it was like for them to be in kindergarten. So some of you are parents of kindergartners, others of you are parents of 12th graders. So think about when these 12th graders were in kindergarten. What did technology look like at Viewpoint School? Well, this was the state-of-the-art computer lab that students were able to use in our lower school. It looks quaint now, but at the time, this was quite cutting edge. And here from our yearbook, you see what students could do to explore further in technology when these lifers, today's lifers, were in kindergarten. You can see a video game design club with 4 students in it. One of those students, by the way, Ernie Acosta, has now returned to Viewpoint as an alum and a teacher of robotics and physics, an assistant teacher working down in the upper school. And on the right, that Linux at Lunch Club does have one brave girl on the right joining those boys to learn programming language at the time, which was quite cutting edge. This is how we advertised our technology program to people looking at kindergarten to join those lifers in that class. What's happened in just the short time since our 12th graders were in kindergarten? Well, this is what technology looks like today. And so you have Weston Belgettis, who's programming with his fellow classmates, programming in virtual reality, using digital photography, using very advanced techniques. You have Persia there, who's working with Mrs. Honig, her film teacher, to edit film on a notebook computer. This is our Girls in STEM Club. 50 strong, they invite guest speakers to campus to show, and you can see they're girl-powered there. They invite guest speakers to campus to make sure that the next generation of engineers and scientists to graduate from Viewpoint are not 90% male. They also mentor younger students, and you can see here that the older girls and boys in the Girls in STEM Club take a special interest in inviting younger students. And they're inspired by Mrs. Rush, who's a phenomenal teacher who's really embraced the power of social and emotional learning, even as she's embraced teaching physics and engineering and computer science. And here you see the tools that students use from lower school, those 5th graders there programming on an iPad in an upper school physics classroom led by 12th grader Chloe. Or Ben on the left, an alum from the class of 2017, who's using very advanced technology in his Film 4 honors class. We can see how far technology has come in a Viewpoint education just in the time that our kindergartners have become lifers. So, what about our kindergartners of today? What will the technology be like in the classrooms in 2030 when they're in 12th grade and they're the lifers? If you know, then I'll invite you up here to give the rest of this talk, because I think the truth is that none of us knows. So these students bring us to our strategic framework, which entirely focuses the future of the school on our mission, on students, and their needs. We are laser focused on what students are going to be needing in the future. We've had a process of developing our strategic framework that has resulted in this draft we present tonight. A year ago, you'll recall that we shared with you the results of survey research and interview research. We reached out to every parent in the school, people who had visited the school, who had applied, people who had come to the school, and people who had turned down our offer of admission. And we took all of that research and then the thinking of the Strategic Planning Committee of the Board of the Trustees, our administration, and our faculty, and we have boiled it down to this strategic framework tonight. You'll notice it's called a draft because we share it with you in the interest of your feedback, and because a framework is a truly living thing. It will inform the planning of our education year after year going forward. We also will have a talkback session tomorrow morning, and we look forward to the spring listening hard to our community and how they respond to the ideas in this framework so that we can really be planning our future collaboratively together so that it becomes a shared vision. Our vision for the future of a Viewpoint education is to be grounded in our values and in a culture of innovation, to be an innovation leader in independent education, preparing students for inspired lives of creative leadership and positive impact in a changing world. Our strategic plan is focused on 5 elements, all of them grounded in our core values. And while I won't read to you all of the words from our strategic framework on these slides, I will go through them so that you can see them. And I want you to know that it boils down to 5 elements that are inspired by these values. The people of Viewpoint, the programs in our classrooms, the community that's at the center of it all, the campus which inspires us, and financial sustainability, which is the foundation for our future. So you see here the values from our mission statement that inspire us. Well, our strategic plan begins with people. And so I share with you some people in this photograph. You might recognize some of the people. Viewpoint faculty who've been here a while not only recognize Jack and Jackie Kennedy or LBJ and Lady Bird Johnson. You can see Harry S. Truman and Bess Truman, and you can see Eisenhower there. There's also someone else. This is Dr. Bill Levy, who is an Episcopal priest who presided, what's this photo? He presided at Eleanor Roosevelt's funeral in 1962. He was an amazing man who lived an amazing life. He was a confidant and special friend of Mrs. Roosevelt, and he went on to teach at Viewpoint School. You come to the 80s, 20 years later, and he taught this young man. This is Seth. Seth is from the class of 91. He's a member of our board of trustees and a proud alum of Viewpoint. When Seth went to the high school in the 80s, graduating in 91, his graduating class had about a dozen people. Viewpoint looked very different at that time. But one of his favorite teachers was Dr. Levy, who could tell him stories about Eleanor Roosevelt and about his life. Seth will tell you about his experiences of Dr. Levy, who encouraged him to think about the world differently, encouraged him to try new experiences and do things he never did. Seth, a vegetarian, would be encouraged by Dr. Levy to try just about anything, and in fact, sometimes he got sick because he was willing to be culinarily adventurous with Dr. Levy. Seth went on from Viewpoint to be an entrepreneur and to start a company devoted to a very innovative textile. And his company, after 8 years, recently won FDA approval to make his textile as a medical device. It turns the infrared heat from our bodies into healing energy. It's an amazing accomplishment for this young entrepreneur and member of our board of trustees. He sits on the strategic planning committee, and so I share this story to tell you about our strategic framework and where it got its start. As we were talking about how we would be focused on Viewpoint's future, we talked about teachers. And Seth spoke about Dr. Levy, about the impact that Dr. Levy had on his life, about how Dr. Levy is still with him today, even though he passed away a few years ago. Seth wanted to do something very special for Viewpoint, and so he's created something that I want to announce to explain what does it mean that our strategic framework is focused on people. So he decided that he could do something for Viewpoint and for the future, and he created the William Turner Levy Endowed Chair for Inspired Teaching. Yes, that's worthy of applause. So tonight we announce the first endowed chair at Viewpoint School created by our loyal alum Seth in honor of one of his teachers, in order to inspire the next generation of teachers, to inspire that next generation of students. It's an amazing honor to Dr. Levy, to remember him in this way so that generations of teachers will remember the impact that he had. And it's a tribute to Seth that that was what his character called on him to do. So that's what is meant when we say that the first goal of our strategic plan is people. To engage, diversify, and develop our faculty, staff, and administration so that we have the best teachers anywhere. The goals in our strategy around people, you can see, include ensuring that our faculty has the cutting edge of professional development so that they are always refining their craft in the classroom, their knowledge and their skills that they share with students every day. And we'd like to create 10 or more endowed faculty chairs. We have a faculty of some 150, and I can imagine honoring more than just one of them with a Dr. Levy chair. You can see goals here around diversifying the faculty, staff, and administration, and retaining, rewarding, and recruiting our world-class faculty. This is our people goal. We've been so inspired by this goal already, and by Seth's example, that we have taken the Hanley Endowment and created a second endowed chair, the Hanley Chair. The Hanley Endowment supports American studies. And then the Board of Trustees has seen fit to take some strategic reserves and create 2 more board-designated Viewpoint chairs for teaching excellence. These will be created with some teacher nomination, and the leadership of the school will name the first class of endowed teaching chairs this spring, who will hold these chairs beginning in the fall. So that's people. The second element is program, and Viewpoint has an authentic claim to a tradition of innovation living out here on the western edge of Los Angeles. Through such programs as our Science and Engineering Expo that took place today. This is 21st century learning at its best, even in the aura of a traditional science fair. You see, students here practice design thinking skills, problem solving, creativity, communications. Design thinking includes empathy, and so you see that her broken arm inspired her to create this remote-controlled backpack to solve the problem of how do I get around school with this very heavy backpack? Since innovation has not yet solved the problem of all of those textbooks in the backpack, she's going to solve it for us. It's not just in our lower school that students are in programs that encourage them to innovate. This is Anthony. On the left, you see Anthony teaching an AP Computer Science Principles course, which Mrs. Rush offered for the first time this year in the upper school. Anthony exhausted all of our math and computer science curriculum really a long time ago, and so Mrs. Rush saw him as a student who could help her by teaching others. As Anthony described what it meant to him to teach younger students subjects about which he was passionate, he said that even though this material was very familiar, he understood it more and more deeply as he taught it. Many of you know that our school has a fine tradition of robotics that's in its 10th year at Viewpoint. And this year, we've taken our first exploration into what's called the First Robotics Competition, or FRC. We've had 10 years of competing with VEX, and this is our first year of competing with FRC. They're 2 very different robotics competitions. VEX extends across a whole year and has a small set of, defined set of resources, whereas FRC is compressed into a short period of time, and students can design just about anything they can. Anthony is one of our top coders, and so he joined the FRC team to help code that robot you see on the right there, which I watched in very dim light one evening track something. So it can see and it can follow autonomously a moving target. And it's not just about STEM, engineering, coding. Innovation in program also finds a home in our lower school, in language arts, and in social emotional learning. This is Mrs. Ikoy, who in 4th grade is leading a responsive classroom morning meeting that grounds every student in a community of classroom where they find their voice and connect with one another so that the classroom is a close, high-touch environment where students feel safe to take risks and make mistakes. Kate also has been supported by our commitment to people, our commitment to professional development, to go to Teachers College in New York Teachers College, Columbia University, New York, to study the Reading Project and Writing Project, and has brought back, with some of her colleagues, new approaches to teaching reading and writing in her 4th grade classroom. The approach to writing in the writing workshop results in Grace's essay. Grace, in 3rd grade, took a writing workshop project of a persuasive essay and used it to write about something that mattered to her. One of the things that Writing Workshop encourages teachers to do is to inspire students to write about things that matter to them personally. You can see that Grace is upset about the fact that the boys and the girls have different expectations on Assembly Dress Day. And her essay goes on. I tell you, I see applications from adults for employment that don't look this good. You see that she goes on to say that the differences that she notes in boys and girls' assembly dress are dangerous as well as unfair and uncomfortable. We're teaching students that words matter, and one of the results of Grace's many revisions of her personal essay was that her words resulted in a meeting with Mrs. Antoine and me, where we could tell her that she had persuaded us to have a look at our uniform policies for girls in the lower school. You see, we're willing to take risks and innovate, and I'm glad that line got the applause it deserved. So we announced that in the program goal, we're creating the Viewpoint Center for the Future of Education. Headed by our Chief Innovation Officer and supported by all of our faculty, and guided by current educational research, the Center for the Future of Education is a place to design, develop, and measure innovative learning strategies, tools, and experiences. We're committed to supporting our teachers in exploring innovative learning, in exploring interdisciplinary approaches, in connecting all of the great things that are happening all across our campus. It's one of the reasons we recruited a Chief Innovation Officer in Annika Emerson over there. Hi, Annika. She'll have a tall order to do. And this is one of the goals in our program section. Viewpoint has a commitment to academic excellence, Mr. Wolfson said, attracted him and his family here and perhaps attracted you as well. And yet, we cannot stand still. The world continues to change, and so Viewpoint will change with it. So we must evolve and align our educational program. What does a commitment to program mean? Well, establishing the Viewpoint Center for the Future of Education. Establishing a center for wellness and balance. You see, the commitment that we talked about with Responsive Classroom in our K through 5 is an early example of what it means to be focused on social and emotional learning, on wellness and balance. You see a renewed focus or a new focus on teaching entrepreneurship, ethics, and leadership skills. Viewpoint has a signal commitment to public speaking that begins in kindergarten when students take stage and can speak to 200 people in front of a microphone, and it continues all the way up through our primary and lower school. There are other examples of public speaking throughout our middle and upper school that we want to knit together as just a part of our commitment to leadership. Taking a look at what our students are doing in robotics and coding and film, clearly these young engineers and innovators are going to need entrepreneurs to go with them. And today's 4th grade engineering expo convinced me that the future of entrepreneurship at this school is very, very safe. And that focus on ethics, you see that we're preparing creative leaders. The world needs leaders more than ever, and they need leaders who are grounded in core values and in ethical reasoning. You see, our program commitment includes commitments to nature and the environment, and it challenges us to extend the Viewpoint education, whether to local employers, colleges and universities, or opportunities around the world, to really build on the excellence we already have. At the center of our strategy is a goal for community. And you see here another fine Viewpoint tradition of public speaking, the 5-Up, which is an emblem of our community. Students students and members of our community give 5-minute talks on subjects that are important to them. In this case, Ty, a Viewpoint parent, Mr. Sanchez, a Viewpoint employee, and 2 students, Jansen and Simone, who are 12th graders, who are giving their senior speeches as part of a 5-up, gave a talk. So you see that it isn't just about robotics and engineering, but also about public speaking, leadership, and the written and spoken word that we're focused. I mention this under the heading of community because what it means when all of us get connected under the heading of connecting our community and learning about one another. It was at a 5-up that many of the people who've worked with Mr. Sanchez for many years learned things about his upbringing that they'd never heard before. And that is one of the things that connects us, gives us a sense of belonging, and helps us to feel safe. Last week, I had to share this photo. It was so inspiring. To celebrate Chinese New Year, our entire upper school community gathered on the plaza. Part of our commitment to community this year, we've begun gathering our entire upper school student body on the plaza so they can all see one another. And last week, that took the form of a Chinese New Year assembly. You might know our upper school student population is so large it exceeds the capacity of this theater. And so they can form upper school community. And then they went on to a Chinese food tasting, which was hosted by our Chinese-speaking parent community. And while some of the parents who've been in our community the longest would say that when they first started those Chinese food tastings, there might be a couple of parents in line, we now had a whole line of parents celebrating their culture and tradition with our students. So community is at the center of our plan, and here is our community goal: to foster active and meaningful engagement among all of the school's constituencies. So what does that mean? Establishing a Viewpoint network. Viewpoint has a pretty young alumni base as the school grew significantly in size about 15 years ago. And so unlike schools that might have many alumni around the world, the vast majority of Viewpoint alumni are younger, and they have phenomenal opportunities to mentor young students by being connected to them. And they have opportunities to connect to one another that will be increasingly valuable to them. So we see the Viewpoint network can add value not only to the alumni's experience, but to the experience of students and parents as well, connecting us all so we can benefit from the richness that all of us bring to Viewpoint. You see, we're also committed to expanding and improving what we do in digital communications, engaging our parents and alumni in new ways, extending our commitments to diversity and inclusivity, and extending our commitments to service learning as part of the goal of which community is at the center. I want to share with you one of the projects that we've done this year to highlight our next goal. Back when Viewpoint was just on 12 acres, these were the batting cages, and they were in the back of the house. You know, you put things like batting cages in the backyard. As Viewpoint expanded to 25 and then 40 acres, and then built the new Robertson family field, these batting cages occupied a place of prime importance in the center of the campus. We took the building of the field as the opportunity to build new batting cages for our baseball and softball programs, improving their situation. And we saw that this once forgotten backyard corner could actually become something more like a central park. And with a pretty modest investment, we have a very big impact, creating an outdoor classroom so that students can gather outdoors in a space that's not quite so covered with concrete, adjacent to the beautiful ecolette and the garden curriculum. Students are so engaged these days in our garden curriculum and in our environmental sustainability efforts, led by Mr. Adam Yates there, that nature is one of the primary values and goals that we have as we look at our next goal, which is our campus. You see that while our first goal is people, and our people lead us to a program, communities at the center, we do still value our campus in our strategic framework and prize the natural beauty of these Santa Monica Mountains in this magical canyon. So what this means for us is to complete our next master plan. The building of that Robertson Family Field was the last project in the last master plan approved by the city of Calabasas. And so one of the things in the next chapter of development will be for us to think about how we use our facilities and steward them for the next generation. A goal around enhancing our existing campus. We have world-class facilities, and we look to find ways that we can continue to evolve and adapt them for the needs of 21st century learning, to find opportunities to connect our community as we are in that Upper School Plaza photo I shared, and to connect us to nature as we are in that Ecolet photo I shared. And then we also challenge ourselves to think about campus opportunities beyond Calabasas. The foundation of it all is our fifth goal, and this is news as fresh as today's Wall Street Journal. Our Board of Trustees, our administration, and I are very focused on how to pay for it all. And so, if nothing else gets your attention, we often look for analogies in higher education. And today's Wall Street Journal reports on the colleges which are sorting themselves out financially into winners and losers. We often see that while the industries that we're in, independent education and higher education, are different, they have different forces, and our budgets are different, of course. We do look at higher education as an example of what's happening financially and economically in the world of education to see what the implications are for Viewpoint. So our fifth goal in our strategic framework is financial sustainability. Practicing sustainability in the development and management of our resources so that we steward the future of this fine institution and lead the way in thinking about different ways of operating. A commitment to innovation isn't only about what happens in the classroom. Innovation must also challenge us to work differently and to think about the way we conduct our business differently so that we can, again, be here tomorrow and 100 years from now. So you see here 4 goals under the heading of financial sustainability. A long-range financial plan which wraps together the questions of tuition sustainability and our proud commitment to financial aid, where we award over $5 million every year to ensure socioeconomic diversity and to make a Viewpoint education accessible to more and more students every year. To inspire our donor community to think about how we can pay for the future of a Viewpoint education and the needs of those students who are entering kindergarten today. To explore new opportunities and to think about Viewpoint's enrollment future, even as we think about the master plan for the campus. So those are the 5 goals of our strategic plan: the people, the programs, the community, the campus, and financial sustainability. And again, while I invited you to think about the teachers who've changed you, our teachers are firmly focused on those students, on the leadership challenges that they will face, and on the ways that we can challenge ourselves to make them better and better for that future. Before we go to our Q&A, I also want to share with you one of our core commitments, which is to student safety. I hope that you're as inspired and excited as I am about the future that lies ahead for our students and about the opportunities that we have to meet that future. But of course, one of the first things we have to do is make sure that we keep kids safe. It's the #1 reason that we're all here. And so I share with you something I shared with the faculty that we'll be rolling out to our parent community, and that is an anonymous reporting system. I mentioned to the VSSA in their executive board meeting this week that no educator can have experienced the events in Parkland, Florida last week without really being shaken. It's an educator's worst nightmare, anyone who cares about children, and certainly a parent's worst nightmare, that when you send your child to school, you want to make sure they come home. It's not only the sort of threats of violence we saw at Parkland, but also other threats to our school safety that might lead us to ensure our safety with an anonymous reporting system. So we'll be rolling this out. And I share it with you tonight in person so I can share with you a couple of caveats. One is that this does not replace, it only augments the #1 safety and security system, which again is our people. our people, our trusting communication and our trusting relationships are really what keeps us safe. And so this is not to change any of the channels that already exist for you to communicate with Viewpoint School. It's yet to add another last resort. And the second caveat is that this is an act of trust, that we invite you to use this system so that we can continue to build those bonds of trust that unite students and the school and parents who are trusting us with their children. This is what it looks like when you go there, by the way. When you log in, you'll find the name of our school, and you can see there a drop-down menu of the sorts of things that one might report on. And while it is perhaps a sad state of the world that we need an anonymous reporting system, I think education is late to the game versus other industries that have had things like this for a while in place. And so I share this with you tonight as another example of action that we're taking in response to a world that's increasingly threatening to ensure our commitments to safety. So we're now going to move into questions and answers, and I'm going to invite up Mr. Wolfson here to be our moderator and question asker. And also like to invite up Rhodey Davis, our Director of College Counseling. Rhodey leads a college counseling department with 3 other full-time counselors. What that gives us is a phenomenal ratio in our college counseling office, and Rhodey's an amazing leader who leads a program in college counseling which is so mission-driven. How many of you have experienced our college counseling program? Isn't it really great? Let's give Rhodey's College Counseling Office a hand. We welcome her to the stage. If you come to a Viewpoint College Counseling presentation, she will share with you the mission statement of the College Counseling Program, and what I can tell you as a happy customer of it, they mean every word of it. They have a phenomenal team, and they really live the words of their mission, which are to inspire students to take responsibility for their future. At the other end of the canyon and at the other end of our program is Kathy Edelman, who leads our primary school with grace and intelligence and great confidence. And Kathy, thank you for joining us up here as well. I usually have to follow Kathy at the primary school assemblies, and that is always a challenging thing to do. And so hopefully among us we can answer questions. So, Mr. Wolfson. Yes.
So, Stephanie and I have had children in all 4 divisions. And I know that each division has its own educational imperatives. Can you give me an example of 21st century learning from each division? Kathy, we'll start with you in primary school.
Okay, thank you. I just have to start by saying how inspired I was by Mark's presentation on the 21st century learning. I couldn't help but take my own journey mentally. I started here 41 years ago. I was a very young kindergarten teacher, and we had a very specific curriculum that we were teaching. And so as I listened and I watched, and I know what I know today about what we're doing at this school, I am just filled with pride and a sense of confidence that your children and the children in primary school, and they go to lower and middle and upper, are getting a phenomenal education. And in primary school, we have a brand new building. This is only our 3rd year, so we have new state-of-the-art buildings which allow the children to have more space than we used to have. We have a differentiated curriculum for our primary school children. You know, children coming into kindergarten now are very different than children coming into kindergarten many years ago. Some children come in already reading. They're reading fluently. Other children are still learning their letters and sounds. So in our program now, we have many, many resources. I can tell you in one kindergarten class that has 16 children in it, there are 9 reading groups because the teacher has assessed every child to see where their reading level is. We also teach not only in small groups with the teacher, but we have rotations. So every core subject area is taught with children going in small groups. There's technology, there are activities, there are specific seat work activities, but they are allowed to make choices within those activities. And I think that choice, as well as collaboration and offering creative opportunities, is really an example of that 21st century learning, as well as our innovation space. Our innovation space, in my opinion, has really changed the culture of the learning. The children are very actively involved in different activities that allow them to collaborate, that allow them to make mistakes. And if this didn't work, well, then how else can we do it? There's lots of materials that they have a chance to use. And that communication that they have with each other and that sense of helping each other is really created a culture of children diving in. They can't wait to work together and be excited about things. And when they're working on arithmetic problems, for instance, it's not about getting the answer, it's about how you got the answer. I might have approached the problem in a very different way than someone else. So it's very exciting in these classrooms, and to see the children excited about learning, confident in what they're doing, is just a pure joy as we are watching them develop and achieving the very fundamentals of school that give them a rock-solid foundation as they move along.
It sounds like you're doing a lot of individualized teaching or individualized learning. And I know one of the areas that I think there was a lot of interest in recently was the changes in the spelling program and how that worked. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I can talk about that. Thank you. So we had moved along. It's been about an 8-year evolution in terms of our core curriculum. And our reading program, we brought in many different resources. And in math, we were doing Singapore math, but we also brought in a lot of different resources so that we could continue to challenge kids that needed that extra challenge, or have manipulatives for those children that still needed that concrete approach to arithmetic. And then we started thinking about spelling, and I, who look at all of the report cards across the division, you notice a trend that you have children who are natural spellers. And so the list that's given to everyone is generally very easy for that child. And they hardly have to study all week, and they get 100% plus the bonus words. Then you have the child in the middle who works hard, they study at home, their parents quiz them, and they come to school on the Friday spelling test, and they can get 100%. They can get that super speller again. But when you look at how they transform those words into their actual writing, most of the time, they don't have the spelling correctly. And then you have that group of students who are very challenged by that list of spelling words, and they work at them, but it's very rarely that they can be successful. So we decided we needed to look at the spelling to see how we could approach it differently. So we came across a curriculum called Words Their Way, and we brought it in. We actually Skyped with some people from teachers who had used it, and the faculty was not particularly thrilled with it. It just didn't seem to match what we were looking for. But we got the samples, and in the summer, 2 of our teachers took those samples, and they started to break it down, and they started to see, okay, this is how we do this, this is how we do that. And they created an excitement about what they were doing. So we decided to have a faculty meeting in the summer, and it was sort of a workshop on how we could do this. And the teachers started to get very excited, and I said to them, you know, we don't have to do this year. Let's pilot it this year. So if you'd like to try it, let's pilot it. And no pressure on anybody. Well, by the time school started, every teacher was all in. And it's a very exciting program. It's exciting to watch. This is our 2nd year with this program. And Every child is assessed, and you look for mastery in certain sounds and blends and different word patterns. And once you hit a level that you haven't mastered, that's where your word lists begin. So again, in a class of 16 or 17, there might be 10 different word lists. And throughout the week, they sort their words every day, and they're sorting their words according to the word patterns. Then there are activities for them. Their words are built into Spelling City. They have lots of choices, and when you're in the classroom watching them, it's amazing to see. They're all hustling and bustling with their different lists, and everything's going on, and they're excited about it. And at the end of the week, or possibly 6 or 7 days, the teacher calls up the children, and she just says, "Show me what you know." Not a test, no pressure. They didn't have to study for it. But it's amazing. She would ask them maybe 8 or 9 words. If they have mastery of those words, they go on to the next list. If they haven't quite mastered it, we have some new activities for them to practice with. Well, the whole spelling program has really now transferred over into the writing, because they're not just memorizing, they're actually actively working with those words. And the other great thing about it is those spelling words have also, the spelling sounds that they're mastering have also transferred over to the reading program and the phonics program. So it's very exciting. It's not traditional. When we were first rolling it out, I thought, I wonder how many parents are going to be upset that we don't have a spelling list, because if you were a really good speller in your day, you would want your child to have those opportunities. But you know what? Not one person questioned it. And I think it's the enthusiasm that the children have with this program and working on their own words and taking ownership of the entire process. And this is kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade. They're little ones, but they are totally capable of taking ownership, and just exciting. And when I am in the classrooms, they show me what they're doing, and it's just a fun experience. And the bottom line is, from my point of view, at school we want to create a love of learning. And when we can have children engaged and excited and feeling ownership of what they're doing, that's what creates that love. And so the teachers and I, and Mrs. Soper as well, are very, very excited about what's going on with this spelling program. And they've now carried it over into 3rd grade. So it's been great. Thank you for asking about that.
I want to call out a couple of things, Kathy, from what you were saying. One of them is when I was talking about how the teachers, as they focus on innovation, are really motivated by what students need. I heard that in the story that you were telling, and I experienced it as we were talking about whether 3 teachers would do this new spelling curriculum, or maybe all 9, and it was the teachers who came to that collaboratively themselves. And I'd also call out that one of the hardest things for teachers to do when they are at the top of their game, when they're excellent, a program that works, is for them to examine it and look for opportunities to improve when they didn't have to. And you created the safety for the teachers to challenge themselves and to innovate in just the same way that the teachers create that opportunity for the students. Because one of the biggest questions that I get, and I think that was maybe what John was challenging us on, is some notion that what we might call 21st century learning somehow represents some kind of a compromise in standards, in achievement, or in excellence. And I think your story demonstrates that that's the opposite of the case, that those students, and I think you can hear it, are so much more engaged, and the work is so much more relevant because of the way that the teachers are approaching their curriculum. And I can find examples just like that throughout our program, K through 12.
That's great. Why don't you give us a couple examples from
so lower school,
and middle school?
I would channel my colleagues, Mr. Weimer and Mrs. Antoine, in lower school. One thing I would call out about the lower school program is the fact that that spirit in our innovation space, which is one of the happiest and places that our students experience in the course of a week. How many of you have K to 5? That's what they come home and talk about. With investing resources in having Mrs. Corno as our integration specialist take the spirit and the idea of that innovation space and integrate it throughout our lower school classrooms. It means that the entire lower school team has that approach. It's not just something they find like, okay, I'm going to do innovation now that I go to the innovation space. So I think the work that is done across all of our classrooms is an example, just as you were giving examples of interdisciplinary learning, not just reading, not just writing, not just spelling, but the fact that they all become connected. And I'd also point to what our teachers are doing in reading workshop and writing workshop as signal examples of 21st century learning that also you can see the results, that students, because the work is relevant and meaningful to them, and because they're collaborating and peer editing, they aspire and they write even better because of the approaches. And in middle school, we certainly have exciting things happening in design curricula. We, in addition to renovating our robotics lab this summer, we also created new space for Mrs. Didden to create new offerings in design and engineering in middle school, upper school.
Yes, Rody?
So in upper school, our spelling program is called Spell Check. So whatever you learned in kindergarten, you really don't need in upper school because you just do spell check. So when Mark asked me to talk about 21st century learning in the upper school, I thought this is easy because it happens every single day in every single classroom. And it is just a wonder to see what happens on a daily basis, not only just in our classrooms, but also on the plaza. You saw a picture of iBlock. How many of you know about iBlock? Yeah, wildly successful. Like you talk to students, what's your favorite thing going this year? We're meeting with all the students right now to talk about academic advising their classes for next year, and everyone says the best thing is iBlock. And part of what's so great about it is it gives students ownership over their time and some time during the day to kind of catch their breath and to collaborate, to work in teams, to hang out, whether that's working on projects, working together on homework, seeing teachers. A lot of students will spend time during iBlock visiting with their teachers, getting the one-on-one help that is so essential and such an important part of our upper school curriculum. But really everything from the formal classes that we offer, from 3D design and engineering, our CAD classes, our linear algebra classes, our classes in mock trial, art. We have huge offerings in art. We are offering all kinds of opportunities for students to practice these really important skills that we consider 21st century learning skills: flexibility, resilience, creativity, leadership, teamwork. So it happens organically, it happens formally in our classrooms. I'm thinking of two students today that I talked to who really, I think, beautifully illustrate this notion of integrated, interdisciplinary learning, which is such a hallmark of 21st century learning. And one is Kevin, who has designed through our 3D design and CAD classes this pill dispensing machine that he used our robotics lab to create, our 3D printer to create. He has a business plan. This guy is an entrepreneur. He has entered this design, and this is a product that he hopes to mass market as a way to help elders take pills on time. It's got like a computer chip that's going to dispense the right pills at the right time. It was inspired by time that he spent with his grandparents and realizing that they had to take all these pills and they were having a really hard time staying organized. So here's a guy who's come up with this idea through his work in our robotics lab, through his work in our 3D design programs and our math programs, because it's very, really elaborate in terms of mathematical equations. I'm not a computer scientist, so I don't really know how that stuff works, but he's entered it into competitions to see if he can gain some traction that way. But one of the really cool things about it is it has inspired him to think about programs that he can apply to for, he's a junior this year, programs that he can apply to for college that combine business and engineering. So, wow, that's so exciting to me to see how it all comes together. So, you know, he's one example. I'm also thinking about Ryan, who is not just an aspiring journalist, but already doing some pretty hard-edged journalism. She is probably going to be one of the editors of our paper next year. She has done numerous summer programs at universities, you know, honing her craft, learning about different types of journalism. She has already interviewed, you know, pretty high-profile people in the LA community. She is really devoted to service and is one of our aspiring leaders to CORE. And so she's finding ways in which she can leverage her interest in journalism to really fine-tune a voice of social justice and awareness to certain problems in our community. She spends a lot of time, she has over 100 hours working for the Sova Food Pantry, and I mean, to hear her talk about the people's stories of the clients that she's serving there and how she hopes to draw awareness to that issue through her journalism, I mean, that's a perfect example of how she's working to you know, not just be a journalist, but to use that as a tool for positive social change and to improve the community. So I could go on. These kids are doing amazing, amazing things, and at the root of it is the flexibility of our program, the constantly, like, in changing, improving nature of our program, and it's, you know, what all of you are able to support us with and help us with.
That's great. If no one has anything else to add, I'll move on to the next question, which is going to be for Rhodey, and anyone else that wants to chime in. But putting on your college counseling cap, the parents of Viewpoint are generally very pleased year in and year out by the college placements that come out in the spring. And, you know, Viewpoint always really has a great showing. There's a lot of breadth, there's a lot of depth to the campuses that the kids get into, and it's usually a great, you know, it's always a great list. But how do you see the changes in education affecting that? Are they going to affect that? How do the colleges view this thing called 21st century learning, or what we're attempting to do?
There are a few places more dynamic than college campuses. I mean, these throw out everything you knew about your own college experience because it is so different now. These are dynamic, international, very diverse communities. They are bringing people from all over the world together from very different backgrounds, and they're all sort of in this tight-knit space, you know, tight space, having to coexist, having to learn together, having to live together, and you know, being challenged to really navigate what can be a pretty difficult, tricky situation for people who may not have wide experience with different kinds of people or different kinds of experiences. So I think that, you know, colleges are very interested in recruiting students who are open to those kinds of communities, who are excited to thrive in those kinds of communities. They have many colleges come right out and ask questions on their applications about, you know, what are the unique qualities that you bring to our community? So as we look to prepare students for college and beyond, because the workforce is so dynamic now too, you know, we are it's not just about teaching them specific information. It's about teaching them ways to learn, teaching them ways to process information, teaching them ways to analyze data, to communicate about that. And that is what they're going to need to do when they get to college campuses. So, you know, the other thing that I think it's important to understand about how 21st century learning relates to college admission and that whole process is, you know, as students find their voice at Viewpoint, as students learn about the things that they love, really invest in the different subjects and the different topics that they're really excited about, that helps them craft this profile with which they can use as they apply to college. So more and more as these applicant pools grow, I'm sure you've read about how you know, applicant pools are growing every single year, almost by double digits. It's really kind of crazy. I'm wondering when it's going to stop. They just keep getting bigger and bigger. It's so important for students to really articulate their fit for specific programs, to, you know, have this self-reflective approach to the college process where they can think about what they want, think about where they've been, think about the programs at different college campuses that are going to help them achieve the goals that they've set for themselves at college and beyond. So, you know, one of the things that we really strive to help students do is to think about the kinds of things that they love to do, apply that to their learning here, and then also to their college applications as they research programs and then present themselves in their applications to college. So it's essential for preparing kids for college.
Yeah, there are two things I would add. One is that just as many of the elements of 21st century education are essentially traditional in nature, excellent communication and critical thinking skills are not brand new to the 21st century. Just as our program represents a balance of traditional modes of education and more interdisciplinary, innovative modes. So colleges are looking for both things too. So one can find, and those of you who have kids in college know this as well, that students in college are expected to learn and demonstrate learning in some very traditional ways. You know, there's an exam on Friday. And in some more innovative ways. It might call them to collaborate or to work in teams in different ways. And we need to prepare them for all of that. Similarly, there are more innovative ways that colleges are looking at applicants, and there are also very traditional ways, which is to say standardized testing. So that standardized testing today is both more important than ever and less important than ever at the same time. And so that's why the customized approach that we take really helps students to put their best foot forward and prepare. And the other thing I'd say, and Rhodey has made this point, is that the last line of our mission statement points at the promise of innovation in education, which is to say, really developing the uniqueness of each child. So when we are really focused from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade on developing the uniqueness of each child, then those students that you're talking about who are examples of 21st century learning, they show up in the process as who they are, as confident learners. And whether they get 4 years of that experience through the upper school or whether they get 13 years of that experience, you think about the accretive value of that. They show up even more strongly in the college process. And so they show up as the kind of students that colleges are going to want and that then employers are going to want, and if there are still colleges and employers in 2030 and beyond.
And I just wanted to add that, you know, as Rhodey was talking about all the elements of ultimately what gets you into college, I think the connection is that I can see that with our little ones when they're just starting out and we're teaching them how to be a student and how to be a friend, the same kinds of things that Rhodey's talking about with resilience and character development and flexibility is everything we do in primary school as well, because they're coming to us sort of with a clean slate. They haven't been in a classroom like this before. And I think that that, you know, primary school is very developmental, it's very nurturing. And then they move to the lower school, and the transfer from primary to lower, there's no real shift for them because they're going into third, fourth, and fifth. But we're all very aware that all of these elements that Rhodey's talking about are elements that are developed through the years. And so the lower school continues with that, as does then the middle school, but very appropriately, because we're looking at stretching them at each point along the way. But I was really taken in listening to you at just how much we're all doing the same thing. And ultimately, you know, when I looked at the photo of the lifers, and I could picture them this tall when we started with them, and to hear what some of them are doing, it just, you could practically burst your buttons. You're so proud of, you know, who they've become. And we all feel so fortunate that we're in a profession that we can make a difference in a child's life and in a child's early years, middle years, grown-up years, and their future. So it's really wonderful to even get to listen to you and to all of this, to really put it all together for us.
Thank you. So, what is the single most important change that will take place in the way children are educated at Viewpoint over the next 5 years? Who would like to tackle that?
This sounds like one of those questions at the end of the radio program where it's like they're going to come back to you and play this back in 5 years and see if you were right. I think for me it has to do with the, oh God, can I pick two? It has to do with, they're related. It has to do with the breaking down of traditional boundaries between disciplines and departments. So really connecting work across disciplines. And then, and connected to that is how it shows up on a transcript.
Okay, and that goes along with what Kathy was just talking about, which is great, about consistency and continuity of ideas between from the primary school all the way up to the upper school.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that just a very deliberate, conscious consideration of the social and emotional learning lives of our kids. I mean, this is mission critical. We have to really pay attention to what's happening with them emotionally and how that's impacting everything that they do. And, you know, I think about we have this great human development program that grows every year. This past year, we added, we call it HD Skills, HD Mentors. So the first semester students are involved in human development skills where they practice empathic listening skills. They learn a little bit about behavior. They learn about social constructs and how people interact. And then they take all the they learn about trust and a bunch of things. It's run by Mara Garcia, our fantastic school counselor, and Kate Hubbard, who's also a really dynamic English teacher who's involved in this program. And then the second semester is HD Mentors, where the students involved go and they take the skills that they've learned and they assist with the ninth grade human development classes. And so, you know, I think about all these, as a counselor, all these aspiring counselors out there who are, you know, starting to learn these skills in a formal way in high school, and how, boy, I can't even imagine what a positive impact these people will be in residential life in college, or, you know, in Greek life at university. So, or on teams as they work with other people, you know, in academic programs at college. So, social emotional learning.
I would agree with the social emotional learning. I think a child's well-being is paramount to the center of what they're able to do. they can have lots of ideas and they can have lots of aspirations, but if that well-being isn't there, they sometimes don't reach their potential. And I know Mark spoke a little bit about the responsive classroom. Our entire faculties in primary and lower school were trained in responsive classroom 3 years ago. And I would say, again, it's another one of those programs that really has changed the culture of primary and lower school. The teachers write a message for the children every day, so they can't wait to get into the classroom to see what that message is. That message is asking them a question or asking them to write something, so immediately they're a part of their classroom. And then they start with morning meeting, and in morning meeting they greet each other. There are different activities. Sometimes morning or afternoon meeting is used for if there's something going on in the class that is upsetting to some children, or there's a feeling that something isn't fair. That circular time where everyone speaks allows connections. And I think that when children feel connected to something, they feel safe, and they start to feel that safety in speaking out. And it's that find your voice and go beyond. And I think the family within the classroom and within the divisions has really, really strengthened from this program.
The next issue of Viewpoint magazine is a focus on social emotional learning. I think the title of it is The Case for Social Emotional Learning, as if one needs to be made. I think some of us grew up with that book, that everything you need to know you learned in kindergarten. And yet, in an increasingly competitive world where parents want the best for their children, we do need to make the case for social emotional learning. Social emotional learning needs like a brand management consultant, because I don't know whoever called them soft skills. We all know that they're the difference makers for students in their future lives of leadership, for them to have soft skills. And we also know that you hear Kathy talking about these kids and their spelling tests, and like, oh, we've taken off the pressure, and look, their achievement increases. Well, and you might have, like me, that little reptilian parent brain going, but don't we need them to have a little bit of pressure? The answer is, believe me, the world provides plenty. And in fact, we can do everything we can to work with students to provide mentors who are trained, and yet we need to really focus on students knowing themselves deeply and living lives of balance so that they can be very healthy. We see that right now, we do want students to have eustress, EU, not distress. And too many of our teenagers right now are living in a state of distress. Not just a Viewpoint, but just in our media-saturated society.
That's a good segue to the next question. So a lot of parents have asked me, and I know there's been a lot of talk about, once we raised the idea on campus about innovative education, 21st century models of education, that, is Viewpoint going to be ahead of everyone else? Is that a good thing? We have a lot of fine schools in the city, and are we going to be kind of an outlier, or where will we fit into that spectrum once we implement these great ideas?
Well, we're already implementing great ideas and have been for years, as Kathy was calling out, because one of the things I'd point out in the verbs, in the language you saw on the slides, is how much it said evolve, evolve. This isn't wholesale change. We're not out with the old and in with the new. This is a constant evolution to meet students' needs and keep students' needs at the center. And that actually really leads to the Viewpoint has an authentic claim to a tradition of innovation. And coming here and meeting the faculty who work all across the canyon, there is innovation happening everywhere. And our job is actually just to inspire and create the conditions for their creativity to really soar so that they can be there for students. And I think you've heard some examples of that tonight. And so what that means is continuing to be a place that's focused on excellence and balance. You talked about a 5-year time frame in that last question, and I go out on a bit of a limb and to say, because I think we want a little bit of a drama for people who showed up tonight, to say that, like, within 5 years, I don't see, an end of the AP program, for example. That's some schools that maybe you're on some sort of, we might think of as a cutting edge, like, oh, we're replacing the AP program. Now, some of you might be inspired to hear that. Oh, good, they're going to keep an AP program. Some of you might be disappointed. Oh, they should get rid of that thing. And I'll tell you, both of those would be kind of oversimplified and wrong. Like, we have an AP program that we're very, very proud of. However, how students experience it will change. I mentioned Mrs. Rush. Last year, and some of you might have heard this story that I've told a couple times, because I was so inspired by our teachers and what it means, and this is just one example. The boy Anthony I showed you, the coder, was in an AP Physics E&M class last year. That's electricity and magnetism. It's college level physics. It's one of the hardest courses that we have at Viewpoint. College level, very challenging physics. And last year, 100% of Viewpoint students got a 5, the highest score on that advanced placement exam in physics E&M. Outstanding. And I talked to Nancy, and I said, Nancy, like, wow, you had a class of physics geniuses. Isn't that remarkable? And of course, you're a phenomenal teacher. And she said, no, actually, they were all across the spectrum in terms of their sort of native physics talent walking in the door. What they did was come together in a way that I've never seen a class do and collaborate. They had different strengths, and they learned to support one another. So they formed study groups, and they knew what his area of strength was or what her area of strength was. And so they learned to, they used their social emotional learning skills, their collaboration skills, and she said that is how they got that score. And when she shared out with the students that they had all achieved this thing together, they all, which is now by email because they're all now college freshmen, except for Anthony, they could all celebrate one another's successes. And that to me was an essential example of really maybe answering your question, which is I see a great place for an AP program that allows students to get college credit in the colleges that still allow it, or allows them to demonstrate high levels of learning. And the way that we get there might look a little bit different as we continue to be informed by the current research, by research into social emotional learning, by research into how kids are learning and how teachers are teaching today. And so it's really going to be as much about how we're doing things as to what we're doing.
That's great.
And I would just say one way to look at it too is I think we're being really proactive in our approach. I think that so many schools, especially when you hear about the craziness playing out across the country at some places, are just reacting. Trying to put in place measures to react to situations happening. And I really like how from your presentation tonight, Mark, and just hearing what the feedback is from all the surveys we've been doing and all the thinking that we're doing in a very deliberate, conscious way about curriculum, about social life, about our facility, about our faculty, that's proactive. And I think I'm not sure all the other schools in the area are being as proactive as we are. And that's, to me, as someone who works here, that is so exciting to be part of this really affirmative movement.
I couldn't agree more, and I think it's important to say this because we talk about this. Bob and I have worked in other schools in California, that what we are aiming at doing here, I would say, is distinctive among the schools in Los Angeles and ideally in the nation. We're aspiring to challenge ourselves to be informed by the best research that's out there, to find the best programs that are out there, and to innovate in ways that are sensible and efficient and effective. And I don't see a lot of places as committed to innovation and education as this faculty is.
I also just wanted to say that I think the investment of professional development that the school provides for the teachers, it allows them to go out to different conferences, to be with other teachers, to hear different ideas, and not just to buy in necessarily to those ideas, but to think about how some of those ideas can enhance what we're already doing or add on to what we're already doing. And Lisa Kessler came into my office today, and she was telling me that someone from Australia had heard about our innovation space, and they wanted to come and visit. And so I feel like our program, in many ways, is a model for what others are looking to do, because we're having so many other schools sending visitors out to us. The word is out that something special is happening right here, and they want to come and find out what it is. So that's pretty exciting.
I think that's great. It is exciting, and I know the board of directors is really looking forward to the next 5 years at this school. Last question. This is a very important question. I know that a survey was sent out this week regarding school uniforms, and I know you highlighted that a little bit in your presentation. So, are changes to the school uniform program underway? What should we expect?
You know, if the most interesting question is on the school uniforms, we're doing a great job running the school. The most threatening question. We did send out a survey. Where I think we might be getting a little survey fatigue. It means we're listening. It means we care. We did, our upper school administration sent out a survey about upper school dress code as a way to continue to have it be workable and also fulfill our goals. And so I think that those of you who are in the upper school saw the survey, and it was carefully written. It doesn't prejudice the outcome. I think it's an authentic survey. I'm looking at Mr. Dilge over there. It's an authentic survey where we really want to know what people think, because you've heard a number of themes about the education at Viewpoint tonight. One is that it's developmental. We have to meet the needs of students from kindergarten through 12th grade, and then even within any one class, you have the developmental needs that are in front of you, an array of needs of students. And so similarly, our uniform policy, meets the needs of students in K through 5 for the culture that we create in primary and lower school. Now we have to pay the attention to the needs of boys and girls in our primary and lower school. We meet the needs of our students in middle school for a little bit more freedom and choice, but still a very sort of refined set of choices that students make in middle school. And then in upper school, our uniform or dress code policy already provides students with a greater latitude of freedom and choice, and yet still maintains some traditional commitments. Students in upper school love, and they've given us this feedback already. Students in upper school, they love the formal dress days for their assembly dress. They think it's a defining part of the Viewpoint culture. It's a tradition they want to see continue. And then, students always have ideas about how to improve the dress code. What I can tell you about the survey without, I'm going to be very curious as anyone to see what it says. What I can tell you about the creation of the survey is that the students were very responsible and reasonable leaders. Just as Grace was there in 3rd grade, I think our upper school students were too in their conversations with Mr. Dilge, Ms. Hanks, Mr. Howie in the upper school.
And I will say that there's been a request for bow ties in primary and lower school, and I actually have a sample plaid bow tie for us under consideration. So we are listening.
I love the bow ties.
For
Ellen
for
always
boys
says,
and girls.
Ellen Howie always says that the dress code is a great thing to give the kids to rebel against, right? Like if you take away the dress code, they're going to start rebelling against maybe something a little bit more dangerous. So,
yeah, it's actually, when we talk about the developmental needs of students, teenagers' job is to push back against the dress code. And so, it's good. And I think that our upper school administration knows what they're doing in engaging them in a lengthy process to show them that change doesn't actually happen as quickly as Grace might think it does in 3rd grade.
yeah, enforcing
No
the
one
dress
student in
code
the
is
upper school is going to
horrible.
write that beautiful essay and get a change made in the upper school.
Thank you very much. If there are further questions that people would like to ask tomorrow morning, you have a coffee.
That's right. So In addition to following us on Instagram, and a shout out to Jill Shaw, who manages our social media as our Director of Strategic Communications and all those wonderful Instagram photos. Thank you, Jill. And the Communications Department. Jill, we have a coffee scheduled for tomorrow, and we invite you to come at that time. You saw I put my email address up there to invite your further questions and dialogue. We are deeply grateful for the feedback that we've had from parents throughout the last year, and that we expect to continue to have as we go through the spring. I know that this framework, as you see, is flexible and yet has been refined so that it can be durable for these coming years. And we welcome your feedback. You know, what's missing, what really resonates for you, and game on. Thank you all.
Thank you all for attending.